Running round town, spending my time, out of a job and not earning a dime. Feller steps up, says, I suppose you're a bronc fighter by the looks of your clothes. It figures me right, good one I claim. Do you happen to have any bad ones to tame? Says I've got one and a bad one to buck. Throwing good riders, he's had lots of luck. Well, I get all hit up, ask what he pays to ride this old nag for a couple of days. Says I'll pay 10 and I says I'm your man. Bronc never lived, I couldn't fan.
You know, my heroes have always been cowboys. But I'm not talking about the store-bought kind. No, not even the NFR kind. I'm talking about the ones who made their living from the back of a horse in the hostile land of sage, greasewood, prehistoric stream beds, isolated springs, and glorious bare mountain ranges in the northern Great Basin. Generally uneducated men who became great educators in the art of surviving relentless weather, volatile cattle markets, rank horses, and impossible employers. As I begin my search for my real-life heroes, I'm taken back to my own childhood days, to a balmy July evening in the mid-40s. A little girl of 4 or 5 peeks through the rungs of the pole corral.
Down in the horse corral, standing low, an old caballo, strawberry roll. Legs was all spavined, he had pigeon toe.
As a young man of 17 steps onto a blue-roan colt for the first time. The confidence of the cowboy that there never was a horse that couldn't be rode is rivaled only by the determination of the horse that there never was a cowboy that couldn't be throwed. The cowboy, a kid named Leroy Horn, whose name in later years was to become synonymous with good horses. While scenes similar to this were to be repeated hundreds of times over the next 55 years in this and other corrals across northern Nevada, the techniques were softened and refined.
Well, we never took time in them days.
You were in a hurry.
Like when I broke blue of them horses, I just tie up a hind leg long enough to get a saddle on them, and then you just crawled on and took off. You know, and now we take time to break them horses.
Born in Elko, Nevada in 1929, with roots as deep in the heart and soul of Elko County as the sagebrush that dominates the landscape, Leroy became the man of the family at age 11, when his father died, leaving an ailing wife and 2 young children. His formal education ended after 8th grade, and his real education began when he went to work full-time, starting colts, cowboying, driving a team of workhorses behind the buck rake in summer, or a sleigh loaded with hay in winter, and running Mustangs with Uncles Hugh, Lawrence, and John Reed on the Owyhee Desert, or with Bill and Arthur Drown in the Bullion Mountains west of Lee, Nevada. It was during these years that Leroy earned the nickname Guts, because of his tireless work ethic and his willingness to take on any horse, the ranker the better.
I put the blinds on him, sure was a fight. Next comes the saddle and the screws are down tight. And then I steps on him and raises the blind.
Leroy married his childhood sweetheart, Barbara Yates, who lived across the street at Lee, when he was 18 and she was 16. Leroy and Barbara bought a 14-foot trailer, which was to be their home for the next several years, as they worked for either the Drowns or John Reed at South Fork, or Huey Reed north of Tuscarora. Leroy's independent nature and tireless ambition led him to pursuits shunned by lesser men. He probably cut more juniper posts and built more miles of barbed wire fence than any other man in the state of Nevada.
And then I never was afraid to try anything. I'd try any damn thing.
One evening, riding horseback home to Lee after a day's work at Bill Drown's, Leroy bought a heifer from an Indian for $30. Bobby was pretty upset, as there really wasn't $30 to spare. This is how they got their start in the cattle business. He also did his share of horse trading.
Somebody'd have a horse they couldn't ride, you know, And I'd trade for that son of a bitch and ride him 2 or 3 years, then trade him for somebody for a cow. You know, and $50 maybe.
By 1959, Leroy and Bobby had saved enough money and built up their cattle to the point that they could buy a place of their own. They and their 3 children, Bill, Charlotte, and Phyllis, moved to the Trout Creek Ranch south of Battle Mountain, which the family still owns. This was no small achievement in an era when acquiring a working ranch of one's own is out of the reach of the ordinary cowboy working for wages. But then again, this was no ordinary cowboy.
In this world, timing is awful important. Being in the right place at the right time, you know, can make a difference between failure and success. Then don't do anything foolish. And I never was afraid of work. Really the most important thing. You know, if something needed to be done, and instead of waiting for somebody else to do it, I just grabbed the shovel and went and did it myself, you know. And I think that was probably one of the big assets. Because you ever notice anybody that's a little bit lazy, they might get by in the world, but they don't get by as good as somebody that'll get to work. I didn't have very many cattle, and when I leased that ranch in there, I bought a bunch of cattle. And I started accumulating cattle, and at one time, I had put 900 cows of my own, you know, and as I know in the 70s, boy, things was bad as they are now. And them guys like the Zadino and that, they didn't want to pay that high interest. But I figured as long as they're willing to lend me the money, I'm going to borrow it.
While cows were his economic lifeline, a necessity to be endured, horses were truly his passion.
God, I don't know what I'd have done without horses. I loved every horse I ever rode, even the bad ones, you know.
With his future as secure as any rancher's can ever be, and his children nearly grown, Leroy had the time to fine-tune his horsemanship and take it to a different level.
I didn't know what to do, and I'd get to put my pressure on them horses, and then they didn't know what to do either. So. And then, I'm not exactly sure where the turning point was. Maybe it was when I came down here and I got to work with Tom Marvel. He would not tell you anything to help you, but you could watch him.
It wasn't until well into his 40s that he finally took his talents into the show arena. Like good whiskey, he seemed to get better with age.
The kids was showing my horses and winning on them, see, but I couldn't win nothing. And I thought, this is going to be a pretty good horse, but what am I going to do about me? You know, and I went to work on smoothing myself up. And when I went to Reno, I had a $1,250 entrance fee, and boy, that used to worry the shit out of me. So all I wanted to do was just go down there and look good. I just didn't want to make a damn fool out of myself. First, I won the eliminations, and I come out second in the finals, see. And if I'd have been entered in the Open, I'd have been in the 16th in the Open, see. So that was kind of the turning point. Then I started to get to be a little better hand, and I got to riding better horses.
Leroy's attitude of self-sufficiency served him well throughout his life and enabled him to overcome obstacles and meet challenges head-on. He believed in taking care of his own problems and maintaining control of his own destiny. This philosophy is poignantly revealed in his story of Clyde, a fractious old cow horse with an aversion to people and a definite mind of his own, who Leroy had put out to pasture rather than chicken feed when his using days were over.
So we was feeding down here one winter, about 3 winters ago, and so the old horse would get down and get up, see, and I knew he was hurting. And so you still couldn't walk up there. So I come home and I got my pistol, and I went back down there, and that horse walked right up to me, just like from here to the chair. And I could have petted him, but I didn't. And he turned around and he looked at the ground. Oh, for probably maybe 5 seconds. And then he turned around and he looked back up, and we both said it was ready, so I shot him.
Leroy was tough, without being hard. He was compassionate, but not sentimental. He was proud, but not arrogant. And he recognized that one of the greatest acts of love was knowing when to let go.
Boy, I've lived a good life, you know. I've had a lot of fun. I rode some of the meanest goddamn horses in Nevada, and I've rode some of the best.
Give me one broke horse with a good fitting saddle, easy on your back. One good woman who makes up the difference for everything I lack. One last chance to sell my cares for the prices go to hell again. Clear blue skies, 18 inches of rain.
Yes, my heroes have always been cowboys. And yes, it seems they still are.
Well, I turns over twice, comes back to earth, likens to cussing the day of his birth. I know there are ponies that I cannot ride, and then yet there's some that haven't yet died. But I bet all my money on that man alive who will stay with Strawberry when he makes his high dive.